well aware of this. These were the people he really preyed upon. He knew they'd buy anything he was selling them. And they would come here. Mr. Baker offered no form of pain relief to his patients here. Back then, they used morphine and laudanum to treat pain in cancer patients. He believed in the power of positive thinking and doing mental exercises to get past the pain. Well, I think if you skin your knee or stub your toe, that might be very appropriate. You're in the final stages of cancer. You're going to need something a little stronger. And he basically had one form of treatment for his patients. That was this secret formula of his. And this would be injected into the patients up to 7 times a day at the point of their tumors. And apparently this was a very painful injection. Now his secret formula consisted of ground watermelon seeds, corn silk, rose petals, peppermint, water, glycerin, and something called carbolic acid. Now back in the 1930s, carbolic acid was used to sterilize surgical equipment. It was never meant to be injected into the human body. So you had people here in pain from the disease, in pain from the so-called cure, no pain relief. Eventually somebody's going to complain about the pain they're in, even crying out if it's acute enough. Mr. Baker couldn't have that. Because if somebody started doing that, everybody else might start figuring out it's all a big con and nobody's getting cured at all. So the minute somebody exhibited signs of pain, this is where they came, behind the steel doors, so none of the other patients could hear them. And if you ask somebody, like, well, where's Mrs. Jones? She was just in the room next to me. What happened to her? Mr. Baker always had the same story. Oh, it is so tragic, he would say. She could no longer mentally handle having the disease. She actually lost her mind and went insane. And so for her protection, and the protection of all my other patients, we put her into the asylum. That's what he called this space behind the steel doors, the asylum. He would rather the other patients thought these people had gone mad than say, I put her into an acute terminal pain ward, because essentially that's what this space was. Now, as I said, people came from all over the country, even Europe, to be treated here. So they may be hundreds or thousands of miles away from their family and friends and people that love them. They're in a huge deal of pain as they're dying from this very painful disease. Nobody they know around them that loves or comforts them. As I said, this was a very dark space, and I think some people died some really horrible deaths in this space. Now, over the last 80 years, people have reported in the main corridor here, sometimes being waken up by a strange little noise at about 3:30 in the morning. They say it sounds like squeaking wheels on a wooden floor. Now, Mr. Baker had pulled up the carpeting. It was just the hardwood floors. So if they peek out to see what's making this odd noise, they've always described the same thing. A young woman in an old-fashioned nurse's uniform, and she is pushing a gurney. On the gurney, there appears to be a body draped over with a sheet. She materializes in this section, goes down the entire length of the corridor till she hits the elevator, and she dissipates down there. Now, if you've been waken up by this noise and you peek out and see this strange sight, you're going to wonder what the heck's going on. Hey, who are you? What are you wearing that outfit for? What's on your gurney there? But she is like the young lady in the mist. They are referred to as residual hauntings, and they do not interact with people at all. It's usually triggered by something unpleasant or traumatic, and it seems to get stuck on the fabric of time or come back as an echo every now and then and plays out. But people have tried to walk up to this woman and wave their hand in front of her face, yell in her ear. She never acknowledges them. They say she just continues on this grim journey with a very stoic look on her face until she reaches the elevator down there. So as I said, now based on descriptions over the last 80 years, we believe this is what the young lady in the nurse's uniform looks like. Now, as I said, this started off as the practice rooms. Then it became the asylum for the pain patients. Logically, the next step is to turn it into the honeymoon suites. That's exactly what they did in here. They remodeled a few years ago and made luxury suites, mainly marketed towards honeymooners. And then in 1937, when Mr. Baker came, he moved the kitchens up a level. Most of the whole lower level then became the morgue. Now, over the years, practical reasons have taken up a lot of the space, and we're down to 3 small rooms in there. But over the years, mainly used for storage. So except for a couple of false walls they put up there, it looks pretty much the way it did back in the day. Now, the first room we're going to go into was the admittance room for the morgue. We have some benches and chairs in there. If y'all please take a seat when we get in there. Follow me on down this way. Now, certainly illuminated over there, you can see a lot of the objects they found in the dig. And right over here, all quiet in the corner, left alone and deserted, is the locker that we just saw in the drain right there on the floor. Autopsy tables, where there's always somebody standing on when I pointed out, ma'am. The autopsy tables were set up here, and that's where the fluids would have been drained out of the bodies. And Phil will come in and just step to that side of the room, please. right there. Y'all up against that wall, that's fine too. I just need this. Okay, is that
compared
okay?
to like
Yeah.
what we have.
Now,
over
let's see,
there.
2,
Yeah.
4, 6,
Oh,
8, 10,
oh,
12. Let's hope 12 come out, then, folks, okay?
I'm a girl.
And this is just a suggestion. Maybe turn your phones off for the count of 20, get the overall effect yourselves, and then start taking pictures. Won't bust you if you don't, but kind of a good way to get the overall creepy effect in here.
Okay. Okay.
So if you have any questions, I probably could take a shot at an answer for you.
Well, and yes, in what capacity did you do a study? Do you work for the hotel? Are you an academic? What, like?
I manage the ghost tours
Okay.
here at the Crescent and also down at the Basin Park.
Okay.
And capacity is, when I started here as a ghost tour guide about 7 years ago, I came from the Northwest. I came from the theater. My background is in theater as an actor and director and a writer.
Okay.
And I came here, needed a job, got this ghost tour job, which was kind of fun.
Sure.
But I was given a script where I was to tell the story of Norman Baker that was actually quite preposterous. And the more I looked at it, the less I felt like passing it on to other people, because it was clearly baloney. So I asked, well, for instance, a nice way of saying is that an urban legend had developed about him, which had him characterized as Dr. Frankenstein. There were stories about him cutting up bodies and doing experiments and taking limbs of one person and putting them on another, burying them in underground until the ground was so full he had to bury them in the walls, which is a great Edgar Allan Poe story.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But there's, and these were the stories I was supposed to be passing on, including 425 people went missing. And, well, not one missing person report, nobody came looking for their relatives, it just didn't add up. So I asked if I could investigate, and the hotel was very good. They sent me to Muscatine, where he's from. I spent a few days up there, talked to everybody I could, got all the information I could from the Historical Society, the library, etc. And then I came back here and I got as much more information as I could. I got the court records and a lot of correspondence. And we have as much documentation as exists about Norman Baker we have here. There's still some unexplored areas, but it's a fascinating story. And I find the real story, which I believe is a story of one of the sharpest con men that America has ever known. I find that story much more compelling than the sort of B-movie kind of stuff that had developed probably on ghost tours elaborated by unscrupulous ghost tour guides who just wanted to put a chill up at their clients' spines, and did. But like I say, I think the true story is much better. So that was my capacity.
Yeah. Sounds like you should write a book.
I have a book. It's not exclusive. It's called House of 100 Rooms House of 100 Rooms, Tales that Ghost Tour Guides Do Not Tell, and that's up at the concierge desk.
Excellent.
Yeah, and people are liking it. It's going. And I actually did a one-man show about Norman Baker, which was my way to get inside his head and to figure out who he really was. Because apart from the urban legend and the facts, there was also his presentation of himself compared to who he really was underneath. This is the way he liked to present himself. Looks like a matinee idol, right?
Yeah. Good looking guy.
I'm in this fight to the finish for humanity, is what he says, and that's how he announced himself. And I'm going to put a line on that. That's his mugshot up there, where he doesn't look quite so confident.
No.
So he was sent down. He was given 4 years in prison. He served 3 years and 3 months. He would have got out in 3 years, but he lost 3 months of his good behavior because he got into a fist fight in prison with the prison doctor. And then he came out. I want to tell you a story, but time is short here because people are coming. So I'll tell you when we get down there.
Okay.
But there's a fascinating story, a poetic justice story about what happened to him when he got out of jail. But the very first thing he did was to sue everybody who sent him to prison. He sued the judge, and then he sued every single member of the jury, and didn't get him anywhere. And then he had the audacity to go back to Iowa, where he had been kicked out for practicing medicine without a license, and asked if he could open a TB hospital. And for some reason they said, no thank you, Mr. Baker, we don't need it. So then he went to live on a boat off Miami, where in 1958, at the age of 76, he passed away, and you probably know what got him.
Yeah, we heard cancer.
Death certificate says cirrhosis of the liver,
Oh.
complicated by a carcinoma. So that was pretty much the end of Norman Baker.
He was a drinker too.
Right.
Yeah.
And a drinker too, yeah. Well, he's usually seen with a cigar in one hand and a drink in the other hand. He liked fast cars and fancy clothes. Had lots of girlfriends, and lived in this macabre hospital situation. So down at the dig, you can see the site as we left it. We had to. The archaeologist asked us to put it on pause. He said we had 500 specimens here. We had to catalog them all, and there's only half a dozen of us for the entire state. So please give us a break. So it's on pause at the moment. We're also waiting for the results of the analysis to find out exactly what is in those specimens. And when all that is done, we will resume the dig and we'll start again. So in other words, this is chapter 1 of a story. We've just found these specimens, and when we figure out exactly what they are, that, you know, whether it turns out to be real human remains and we can maybe do some DNA testing, or if it turns out he got all these things from the butcher shop, whatever it turns out, it's going to give us a big piece of information about Norman Baker.
That's a
So
killer.
they can't tell you anything yet?
That's a killer.
Well, they haven't told us anything yet. Apparently there's 6 archaeologists for the entire state, and they do all the Native American sites and everything
Yeah.
else.
Right,
So
the state archaeology program, like, 'cause
yeah,
Florida has one of those, yeah.
yeah. So this is all pretty much falling apart. I don't know whatever that was in there, but that. You see how some of these survived with the liquid
Aren't you
in them.
tempted to, like, open them?
Well,
I mean,
this
that's
one
exciting.
opened of its own
Is that-
accord, and
that-
Oh,
I
wow.
think you'll.
Yeah.
Oh gosh.
Oh.
This.
What is that?
Well, it satisfied any temptation I had to open
Right.
them up.
Looks like turkey
It looks
giblets.
like fur.
Yeah.
It looks like fur.
Oyster shooters, I think. But-
Oh my god.
Does it ruin oysters for you?
Yeah, that's it. I lived in New Orleans and I liked them, but I'm done with that.
So I don't know what it is. I had a vet here said she thought it was, she could see an eyeball in there.
Oh,
And again, can you take a person's eye away? And I don't know, put it in this. Proofs of our success.